The following content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not constitute means for diagnosis, healthcare advice, nor treatment. Make use of a qualified healthcare professional for such purposes.
Once we've decided which items to eliminate or exclude from a questionnaire because they're not representative enough, we now need to confirm which items we're going to keep. So it's like we're double checking our work. So with the confirmatory factor analysis, we're not comparing items here, we're comparing the model itself to other possible models that can be used.
First item was, I'm always by myself. The second item was, my eating patterns have changed. So now we have determined that we're going to eliminate I like squirrels as an item that could assess for depression. What we're doing now with the CFA is to say, okay, we have, I'm always by myself, and we also have eating patterns. Do these truly relate to my variable? That's what the CFA does. They're trying to make sure that we're not making a mistake by retaining these items. Basically, we're not doing type 1 and type 2 error. So that's the point of a CFA, right? So maybe the person is alone because they were meditating, and maybe this item has nothing to do with depression, although we know by literature that it does. But assuming, say, for example, that it had nothing to do with depression, but rather something else, even though it appeared that it had to do with depression. Maybe it has nothing to do with depression at all.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. Okay, so when we're interpreting a CFA model, there's a few criteria that we need to meet. The first thing is our chi-square goodness of fit. This is a type of statistical model often used in qualitative research, and I would say you'll always see this with the CFA table, but the important part about this, about the chi-square, is that it has to be significant. So it has to have a p-value of at least 0.05 or less. It just has to be statistically significant, or else the model is considered inadequate regardless of any other features. So chi-square has to be significant. And then also, we have to look at some indexes as a criteria. So first, we have the Tucker-Lewis index, TLI, and then the comparative fit index, CFI. These need to be as close to 0 as possible. And then the RMSEA, root mean squared error of approximation, and the root mean squared residual, SRMR, these need to be equal or higher than 0.95. So these are a lot of names. Basically, with the Tucker-Lewis index, I would say it measures the relative reduction of misfit or level of fit per degrees of freedom in that model. While the comparative fit index, that analyzes the model fit by looking at the discrepancy. It looks at the discrepancy between the data and then whatever hypothesized model there is. And then it adjusts for the sample size inherent in that chi-square that we apply in the first step here. And that's what the CFI does. And then the root mean square error of approximation, that simply is a way to avoid issues of sample size if there are any, while the SRMR is an absolute measure of fit. So this all has to do with whether or not the model fits what we're looking for. I do want to make a note, there are no p-values listed in this table for some reason, but just assume that they're all significant, except for the one factor model. So just assume that the bifactor, 2 dependent factors, and 2 orthogonal factors, that they're all significant. So you can see that the features that we just talked about, they're highlighted here in these boxes. Already we see that the bifactor model, it has a TLI and CFI relatively close to 0.95, which is what we want there. The RMSEA, that's much closer to 0 than the others, and then the chi-square. So these are all the considerations that you need to interpret whether or not it's a good fit. And this is just an example of how you would format your CFA interpretation. You would want to address all the criteria, so whether the chi-square is significant, the TLI and CFI being close to 0.95 or not, and then the RMSEA and SRMR, whether or not they're close to 0 as well.